So I wanted to share, I wanted to talk a little bit about the march on Saturday too. And I don't have as clear and coherent a picture as Venerable Simke gave yesterday, and maybe that's good enough. Mine are more like little postcards and moments of what I appreciated about doing the walk and what I saw and what I thought. I went back to this concept of engaged Buddhism. I wanted to look at the definition and how it's defined in the world, because we don't really proclaim engaged Buddhism as our thing here, but that's what we're doing. A large part. The definition says engaged Buddhism refers to Buddhists who are seeking ways to apply the insights from meditation practice and Dharma teachings to situations of social, political, environmental, and economic suffering and injustice. Well, that's not just engaged Buddhism, that's Buddhism. Buddhists are people who are trying to apply the insights of meditation and Dharma to their own minds and to help sentient beings. And so, sometimes that question, we've gotten a little bit of a pushback on some of our Bodhisattva Breakfast Corner talks lately about, how can you be talking about these things? But if, as Venerable said in that inner talk the other day, if our practice in our mind is to continually trying to cultivate a wish to benefit sentient beings temporally and ultimately, then what is there to do but to look around and see where is there suffering and where are things not going right, and why in the world how could we not speak up and say something, do something in suffering here and now. So Saturday's march was, I've done a lot. I was thinking about, I think my first protest was about 1970. I was in Lester Maddox, who was a well-known Georgia governor segregationist, who came to talk to the Georgia Governor's Honors Programs, and there were very few black kids in our program that summer, but we all held hands together against Lester Maddox. And I would say that was the last march I went to that didn't have much anger, partly because we weren't old enough to know what we were doing. And the many marches I've done since, they've all been peaceful marches, protest rallies, but always driven by a sense of anger and outrage. And I think it's really hard not to have that energy when we're looking at anybody's rights being oppressed in any way. Anybody not allowed to have their full humanhood celebrated and enacted. But what struck me so much about Spokane, I don't know if this happened in all the millions of marches around the world, people marching, but in Spokane, that quality of anger was pretty much absent. There was strong feeling for making change and making things right. But I didn't feel this kind of strident anger, and that to me was very notable. I was, at the rally, I was behind a sign, which was good. So the convention center where the rally was holds 6,200 people. It was full. And so now they're estimating that there were 8,000 people at the march in Spokane, 1,800 outside. But at Venerable's suggestion, actually, we left early and we were able to get inside. But we were trying to eat our lunch too, so we were seated along the wall, and I was right behind the big Girl Scout sign, so I couldn't see anybody on the platform, which was good. I could just listen to their message, and I didn't quite get the vibe of the visual. But one of the first people that we talked to, that spoke once we were there, said something that very impressed me very much and stayed with me through the whole walk. First of all, she said, number one, stop freaking out. She said it doesn't do any good, it doesn't help anything. It's done and there's work to do. And number two, she said, this movement didn't start yesterday. And it didn't start today. It's been going on for a very, very long time. And we're just moving forward in a great wave of people. So instantly, this brought two things to mind for me. One was, look at how we cling to permanence. We think, oh, we've made so many great strides. We've moved forward in women's rights. We've moved forward, and now gays and lesbians can get married, for goodness sake. We've had all these things that we're like happy and rejoice about, and we think it's going to last forever, or like this is how it is now. And it's not. Things change just like that. So also does, some negative power comes into being, or some really strong destructive force comes to being, also changing like that. But somehow our delusion, our ignorance grasping to that permanence clings onto it, and that's where our our sense of complacency starts to settle in, actually. It's like, oh, things are cool now. I don't have to be aware. So anyway, it just struck me how very much, if practicing and being aware of the nature of impermanence helps us stay alert to the need to continue. And as we were talking about this on the way home, Christina said, well, maybe there will never be a time when everybody's has their rights, everybody's free, because there'll always be some other, we're all under the power of afflictions. There will always be some other force whose greed is going to get in the way, and that liberation is actually the only true thing to be working for. It's only through liberation and enlightenment, our freedom from samsara entirely, that will get us anywhere. And that to look at these protests and marches and our engaged Buddhism as steps along the way to help us benefit sentient beings and create the merit and cultivate the wisdom that we need for that, that's a great mission for doing our engaged Buddhism. So another thing that I was really trying to do as we were there in the march, and there were all these people, so kind, so friendly, everybody just talked to everybody, you're jammed in there together, so you just talk to your neighbor and find out where they're from, and met some very nice people. A lot of people were very happy to see us, as Venerable Simke mentioned yesterday. But trying to recall that practice that Venerable has often mentioned that she does in airports, of looking around and going, these are the people we're practicing for. These are the people that we want to attain enlightenment for, in order to liberate us all from the need to have to do this. It was sort of like, that was my way of thinking. And it brought to mind this quote that Venerable has given us also, that Lama Yeshe would say about people, they means well, dear. I thought, oh, everybody here is meaning so well. So well. And then I thought, but all the people who aren't here, who are unhappy about this march, they mean well too. They are meaning well too. And whatever suffering of their own or their families or their tribe or their people, they too are wanting to be happy, just like this group here. So to have this sort of quite a visceral experience of being in a wave of people clearly caring for each other, clearly caring for the planet, and recognizing that even on a very gross temporal level, we can have this sense of feeling together. Somehow, it made me more welcoming of all the people who didn't want to be at that particular walk. Somehow, that's because there were so many, and then as I looked at all those photos of marches around the world, I just had this sense of how alike we are in wanting to be happy and what our different strategies might be. So that also, was a vivid impression in terms of why to continue to work for the benefit of all sentient beings. And then another thought about this, this movement didn't start yesterday. It started with the Buddha. It started, I don't know, thinking about the kindness of all those who have come before. And when you can start counting back, if you just take any one movement, if you just take the women's movement alone, and start counting back to the day before and the day before, and who worked so hard behind the scenes, whose names we don't know, women who marched in the streets in the 20s, and women who marched in the streets in the teens so that we could actually vote. People who made then going back to how this whole country was put together so that we still have the legal right to march in the street. And then there were all the cops too, who were so kind, so helpful, so much there to create the safety of the, I mean, it was just so beautifully inclusive. So for me, that march really was uplifting in terms of validating again our capacity for goodness, and our capacity for goodness not just on what sometimes for me is a far, far, far away liberation thing, but our capacity for goodness every single day, and our capacity for goodness together creates more goodness. This other thing about dependent arising, right? We are part of the conditions. I'm coming back to this again over and over and over. How we behave day to day, how we enact our values in the world, we are part of the conditions that create the whole that we all live and share in together. And so that responsibility feels something that I can take on more, it's more tangible. I'm very inspired by the idea of bodhicitta. And I truly aspire to cultivate that someday. And I used to make prayers, may I realize bodhicitta in this very life. And I finally recognized that that's probably not going to happen baby cakes. But but the aspiration can be enacted by keeping my confidence and my faith in my own practice and my own capacity to affect the conditions around me. And if I do that, and if we do that together, and if we commit here as a community, which we are, and that spreads out, and then we're in this whole community of millions of people who are marching for all kinds of rights, for the benefit and health of the planet at this point, and that is not a hyperbolic statement anymore, then we're going in the right direction. So, many little postcards. Also, I want to just share my favorite scene from the day was that we were marching down the street, and there on the side, Venerable, I didn't bring the photo, but Venerable something, I had her take a photo of this man who was in a suit. He was in his, Yes, he had his cane, silver-haired, very distinguished, wearing this trench coat, kind of trench coat, and a red umbrella. It wasn't a cane. Very distinguished, very, distinguished older man with his little pink hat with the ears on. It was so good. We bowed, we smiled, we waved to him, and he waved back. But inside we're all the same, and everybody wants to be happy and free of suffering. So may we bring that about together.